New polling here in Germany shows a growing number of Germans are in favour of rethinking migration policy. This after several terror attacks in which the key suspects were migrants or asylum seekers. 77% of those polled said Germany needs a fundamentally different approach to its asylum and refugee policy with the aim of fewer new arrivals. Last week, the anti-immigration far-right AfD made a strong showing in regional elections in eastern Germany. The results produced divided regional parliaments where it could be difficult to form governing coalitions. Now, the conservative Christian Democrats have said they will never cooperate with the far right, but pollsters asked people whether the CDU should drop its opposition to work with the AfD. 60% said there should be no cooperation. 35% think it should be an option. And notably, the gap is 10 points closer now than it was just over a year ago, suggesting that some voters are becoming less wary of working with the AfD. DW's political correspondent Matthew Moore spoke to people in the city of Erfurt. He asked them about possible cooperation with the far-right AfD.
They were elected, that's a fact. And we should give the AfD a chance and not put them in the Nazi corner from the outset. That would be unfair.
Treat them with caution, sure, but I think it would be wrong to reject them completely.
Why?
Every opinion is important.
No cooperation with the AfD, no matter how or where. Don't get involved with them.
I believe that regardless of what the party's goals are, there should be no firewalls. Instead, there should be some kind of dialogue.
And DW's political correspondent Matthew Moore joins me now for more discussion on this. Matthew, the big question here is whether it makes sense to work with the AfD, to force them to govern, to drop this firewall that has existed in German politics. What do people there who you spoke to think?
Claire, I put that question to politicians and to voters, and I got a mix of answers, really. On the one hand, the politicians, political leaders in Thuringia would say, under no circumstances do you give fascist power. And that was their words, fascist. And the leader of the AfD in Thuringia is allowed to be described as a fascist by courts, has said that. And also the party there has been described and labelled as a right-wing extremist party by security services. So let's just put that there. But then when you speak to people on the street, you sense that people think that as a party that's now got more than, well, around 30% of the vote, 33% of the vote in an election, it becomes increasingly hard to block them out of talks to form a coalition government. And they see that there's a kind of democratic question. They find it unfair, as we heard. And that's not just AfD voters. I got the sense from speaking to people who voted for other parties that they also found it hard to continue this firewall going forward. And this is going to be the kind of the challenge for Germany's political leaders in the coming months and the coming years, is what to do about this question. Because on the one hand, the party is getting popular and more popular by the day. On the other hand, they're considered far-right extremists and a danger to democracy.
And the question here is whether we're moving toward a moment where the CDU, this is the party of Angela Merkel, whether it will break this firewall and join forces with the AfD. Are there any signs so far that this is happening?
The leader of the CDU, Friedrich Merz, has said that he will not cooperate with the AfD under any circumstances. He's been very resolute on that. Interestingly, Claire, he said, though, that he thinks that this word of this firewall, Brandmauer in German, this firewall that politicians talk about, is unhelpful. He doesn't use it, he says, because he says it allows the AfD to kind of paint themselves as victims and their voters as well as being kind of unheard, that, you know, that the mainstream's not taking your concerns seriously and they won't even give us the chance to kind of pitch into the work of governing. So he says he won't use it, but we have noticed since in recent weeks, I would say, and in recent months, a kind of shift from Friedrich Merz. He's got a lot tougher on one of the issues which the AfD considers its main core issue, which is immigration. His rhetoric has really changed in the last 10 days or so. And so I think he's trying to kind of at least appeal to some of the people who are voting for the AfD, if not kind of outright going to their polity positions or working with the AfD.
And Matthew, we've also just taken a look at some new polling on Germany's migration policy. How do you think that is having an effect on how the German government is tackling the issue?
This has been an issue really kind of rumbling for the last 18 months or so. But what was stark about this was the rise in the number of people who think that this is a key issue. 3 out of 4 Germans now say that this is the most important issue for Germany, and that is really the kind of the irregular migration. That is people coming here to claim asylum, and it's a really tricky problem for the German government to solve, because on the one hand they want to be a place where people can come, and if they're seeking shelter or a safe haven, that they will get a fair hearing here in Germany. On the other hand, they're finding it very difficult to return people who maybe haven't had their asylum applications upheld, and it's costly because the local municipalities here in Germany are saying that there's a lot of people coming, we can't cope with the numbers, housing and food and so on. And so what you're seeing is this kind of really complicated problem, and that the voters are desperate for an answer to this problem, and that politicians are really scrambling to find out what is the solution that is both fair but also deals with these concerns that voters have.
DW's political correspondent Matthew Moore, a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for that.
Friedrich Merz is the leader of the opposition conservative CDU here in Germany. Mr. Merz, 3/4 of Germans want a turnaround in migration. You've told the Chancellor you want his coalition to agree to pushbacks at the border by Tuesday, or else.
We've been in intensive dialogue with the Chancellor for a good week now, discussing how we can respond effectively to irregular migration in Germany. We will have to talk about the issue of repatriation, but above all about limiting immigration. And something must be done at the German borders, and our proposal is to actually turn people away at the borders now and not to delay any longer. We've known since 2015 that it is legally possible, and now in 2024 we have to finally decide to do it.
You offer dialogue, but unless he agrees to that, what will then happen? Will you discontinue talks?
We had our first big meeting. My suggestion was a one-to-one format, which turned into 3 of us and almost 50 from the government, which is too big a group to decide. The Chancellor must now make a decision himself. The Constitution gives him the authority to issue directives, and he has to claim that authority and tell his government, we're doing this. And if he doesn't make this decision, then there's no point in continuing the discussion in such large meetings and in such a large group.
The far-right AfD party just scored big in 2 regional elections. It is your conservative CDU is now in the lead in both states and trying to form a coalition. Will the firewall of non-cooperation with the far right continue, or do you see a change, at least regionally?
The very simple and very clear answer is yes, we will not start any cooperation with the AfD at any point. The CDU was very clear in its resolution on this at the party conference, and I reiterate it every week and tell voters ahead of the election, don't get your hopes up. There will be no cooperation, no government with such a party. The CDU would be selling its soul if it were to cooperate with a right-wing extremist party in Germany.
Now, there's a very heated debate right now here in Germany over migration largely, but what do you see as the key problem that Germany needs to solve? Is it indeed migration or something else?
Migration is the main issue. In my view, however, there's a second issue behind this, which is at least as important to people, namely the weakness of our economy, our country's ongoing economic weakness. We have companies that are now laying people off despite a shortage of skilled workers. Our demographics have obscured that up to now. Meanwhile, we've lost 300,000 jobs in industry in the last 3 years, and that has to be stopped. Germany has to get away from the structural weakness in the growth of its own industry.
Friedrich Merz, leader of the opposition CDU, thank you very much.
Many thanks to you.